Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the University of Oregon and the Lundquist College of Business Center of Excellence webinar series. Our first in our series is with the Center for Entrepreneurship. My name is Jared Barlow. I'm Executive Director of Admission here at the Lundquist College of Business. And with me today is Nathan Lilligard, and I'll have Nathan introduce himself.
Hey, hello everyone. Again, Nathan Lilligard. I'm the program manager in the Lundquist Center for Entrepreneurship, focusing specifically on the graduate programs we have here at the U of O. I teach in the program and also help students through the process as the program manager with experiential education, career and internship advice, and just sort of generally being a contact point for students as they go through the program.
Excellent. Well, Nathan, take us through what is the Lundquist Center for Entrepreneurship? What does it do? What's its function? Let's talk a little bit about that to get us started.
Sure. So the Lundquist Center for Entrepreneurship is approaching, oh man, I want to say like 31 or 32 years old now. So probably been around longer than many of our students are old. But it was originally established as really one of the first collegiate centers for entrepreneurship in the country, and sort of in that first wave in the early 90s, where colleges were recognizing the value and importance of entrepreneurship as a discipline of education in business schools. And so the Entrepreneurship Center exists to sort of tie the academic work that happens in the College of Business to the outside world and sort of alumni and community members who are starting and growing companies. So we work really sort of as a way to connect the outside world with our students, and we've been doing that for 30 years. And so we have activities and events that we put on. Like right now, I'm working on a business plan competition called the New Venture Championship. We've got a program for the Provost Innovation Fellowships that is happening. So we do a variety of things to give students a way to get experiences out of the classroom that help them understand entrepreneurship and business.
That's exciting for a great place for students to kind of make those connections.
Right.
So one of the questions that we see a lot from graduate students looking to do innovation and entrepreneurship is kind of an MBA specialization that's tied to the Lundquist Center for Entrepreneurship. So what's the difference between, why should someone do an MBA with a specialization in innovation and entrepreneurship as opposed to just going out there and trying to start their own company? What's the benefit to going through the center and choosing a specialization in their MBA for innovation and entrepreneurship?
Sure. Well, anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur, the most important thing to understand is you don't need an MBA to be an entrepreneur, right? You don't even need a high school degree. You don't even need a high school diploma to be an entrepreneur. You can go out there and just start a business and grow it and be successful. But going to pursue an MBA and focusing on innovation and entrepreneurship gives you a different set of tools than you would get if you just went out and started a company, right? You learn about finance and accounting and management and marketing, all these different disciplines, which really affect the way you would build and grow a company. Now, many people have been successful without it, but I think the entrepreneurship focused MBA is helpful to help students sort of understand what they're getting into when it comes to growing a business, and also gives you a really good fallback plan should something go wrong with your startup or markets change, pandemics happen, whatever it might be. Sort of the MBA is always a good thing to have in your back pocket, right? It gives you an opportunities beyond just starting a company. And the last thing I'd say around an MBA for a startup versus just going out and doing it is that in the Oregon MBA program, through the classes and the programs that we've developed, you really get a chance to test your ideas and figure out what the real opportunity is without the risk of time and money that you would have otherwise, right? So you can learn in the program, you can take those risks, you can work through those hypotheses without putting your capital and time on the line.
Oh, that's really good. You mentioned a lot of really good points there for students to know. One of those things you mentioned was talking about the classes that students would take in innovation and entrepreneurship. So what are some of the classes that would be required for a student looking to do kind of a specialization in innovation and entrepreneurship?
Sure. So we start with, it's really a sequence of classes that we've formalized, but it starts with the class that I'm actually teaching right now and was teaching, in the last hour, called Recognizing Business Opportunities. And that class is focused on the idea of understanding what makes a good opportunity, how do you develop that opportunity into a business proposition, sort of figuring out, whether or not there's a feasible idea there. The second class that you would take is another class that I teach in the fall called New Venture Planning. And that is taking that sort of from idea into potential venture and building upon not just the idea, but actually the business mechanics of whether or not something can work. And then we have another set of classes after New Venture Planning called Venture Startup Practicum, which is where students can actually put what they've learned in those previous two classes to work, um, building through their business plan and really putting it into play. So the great example this year is I've got a couple of students who hit the fall in my fall class. They wanted to start a pet park, an indoor dog park. They are right now in the process of talking to real estate agents about what spaces look like, trying to figure out their costs and their marketing, doing customer research surveys, and they're doing all of that for credit under the umbrella of the program, because that's what we're trying to help them do, is make it real.
Oh, that's exciting. So what are the most popular classes? So you mentioned the good sequence of classes. Is there a particular class or two that is really popular with those students that take on this specialization?
I think if there's a class that's popular, it's New Venture Planning. I think I get students from not just the MBA program, but from all over campus who are interested in the idea of building a startup, or at least understanding what that means. So we get students from the College of Education and some from the sciences and some from other disciplines around campus, where people take that course because they want to figure out if at least they want the basic knowledge of entrepreneurship.
That sounds like a really good class. So you mentioned earlier about, the students are here and the center is here in Eugene. Talk to us about why is Eugene a really good place to study innovation and entrepreneurship?
I think if there's a takeaway that's sort of, there's a way to boil it down simply, I would just say community accessibility, right? So because we're in a relatively small urban environment, Eugene's 250,000 people if you put all the people in the county together. Um, it's a way we have the ability to get access to business leaders and experienced entrepreneurs and mentors and advisors that it's hard to replicate in other places. So we've got a pretty thriving entrepreneurial community here in town, and it's just a really good place to experiment and try new ideas. And it has been that way ever since Bill Bowerman put rubber in a waffle iron, and rubber on the track, right? He was experimenting and trying new and different things. And so the community today is very supportive of new ideas and new business opportunities. In fact, we've seen with local food and beverage companies where the local markets, the local supermarket chains are actually really friendly to companies that are starting out of the program, starting out of the university. We have the Duck Store, which is our bookstore. They take in student ideas and they'll put an order in for the products that students are proposing. So it's really just a good supportive place to get things off the ground.
So you mentioned a few things about campus, with the duck store and things like that, but what are there other community resources that the university ties into kind of in the Eugene area that students could have access to?
Sure. There's something called Eugene RAIN, which stands for Regional Accelerator and Innovation Network. That has morphed over the last couple of years into something called Onward Eugene, but it's essentially a community organization focused on building up entrepreneurship and innovation as a component of the local economic system. So there are talks that happen where they bring in speakers for that. There are accelerators or programs that you can participate in outside of school, where I've had students that have gone through the MBA program and they go off to the local accelerator and they continue to develop their business. So there's lots of those sorts of things. And then we tie in pretty closely with communities in Portland as well. It's just a couple hours up the road, and there are lots of opportunities now to do that. And even over into Bend, into Central Oregon, where we tie into things that are happening there. And I've found in the last year with restrictions on travel and activities, that it's become a little bit easier even to engage with people outside of the university community. So there's just lots of ways that being in the University of Oregon MBA student helps open the doors for you, both locally and around the state.
Those sound fantastic. Can we dive in a little bit deeper? You mentioned kind of some Portland activities and things like that. I understand that every year we do the New Venture Championship. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of those experiences? Like, how do students get involved in those type of activities? What do we do as the university? And then how do students get involved in those activities as well?
Sure. So the New Venture Championship is a global business plan competition. Again, it's in its 30th year. So about 30 years ago, everything started moving. But we invite companies, or we invite applications from all over the world. So we've just gone through our first round of reviews, and we have 65 different ideas from all over the world that have submitted their business ideas to us. So we have a panel of judges. They'll go through and pick the top 16 by scoring them. And then those 16 teams will compete this year virtually for the first time, but we'll have 4 rounds of 4 teams, and we'll pick a winner out of each of those 4 tracks, and then they will move on to the finals. So it's really a pitch competition, an idea competition, if you will, open to anyone. So it's not just the University of Oregon. It's open to like I mentioned, people from around the world, and our winners have been from Arkansas, from Purdue. We've had winners from Northwestern and Thailand, all over the place, where we take the best ideas, and we have a set of judges who score and evaluate them, and we give them real money to take away when they win.
That sounds exciting. Now, what other experiential opportunities? You talked a little bit about, the different classes and things that students will be doing. So students typically would participate in kind of a weekly seminar class as part of the specialization. Let's maybe, if you can, explain a little bit more about what that looks like for students, what types of guest speakers are introduced, or what type of, do we do visits out to those, what types of companies, if we can kind of talk through that a little bit.
Sure. So the visits out to other places have been limited this past year, but we have had some really great speakers that come in to our seminar. So this year, the seminar has been balanced. It's sort of shared between the sustainability students and the entrepreneurship and innovation students. But the best way to look at it is the example we had from a few weeks ago. So we talked to a partner at a venture capital firm over in Bend, Cascade Seed Fund. So we had a venture partner on one week, and then the next week we had the CFO of a company called Laird Superfood, which is a natural foods company based out of Sisters, Oregon, that just recently went public. So we had, the experiential opportunities there is getting a chance to sort of understand the business from the lens of a venture capital investor. And then the next week, listen to someone who's gone through an initial public offering of a small, sort of rapidly growing company. And so those are the types of sort of experiential opportunities that we bring into the program through the seminar, where we have speakers that talk about their particular ideas and what they've done. So it's a balance of sort of finance and sustainability and entrepreneurship and innovation. And we try to bring all of those topics in together and really let students sort of understand from the business leaders themselves, sort of what's happening and why things are growing the way they're growing, sort of how it works to do, grow a company, etc.
That's awesome. Now, and as part of an MBA, typically students, if they're doing either the accelerated 15-month program or the 2-year MBA, they'll have an opportunity to do an internship. What type of internships would students want to do during that summer between their first year and their second year in an MBA program that would help them, foster these ideas of innovation and entrepreneurship? What kind of opportunities are available, or
Well,
should
there's
students look for?
Well, it sort of depends on where your focus is, right? So if there's a student that's really focused on a particular business opportunity and an idea that they have, so they come into the program, they've got this idea, they want to develop it further. Often the summer can be spent really working in either a related industry. So let's say you want to start a clothing company. Well, it'd be a good idea to go get an internship with a company that's in the a rapidly growing clothing company. Say you want to start a food business, it might be a good idea to go get an internship with a well-established food brand locally, where you could understand what their growth projections are and sort of what it means to work in that type of business. So those are some of the things for the more entrepreneurial students to focus on. And if students are not particularly tied to an idea, for their particular startup idea, I encourage them to go and find an internship with a company that's on a rapid growth trajectory, so that they can understand what it means to work in an environment that is focused on growth. And that helps a lot for students to understand sort of what the opportunities might be when they finish their MBA and they want to go and work for a company. And it's important to understand what you do and don't like about that, because sometimes rapidly growing organizations are chaotic and stressful, and there's a lot of unknowns. And so you've got to understand whether or not you're comfortable in that space. If you are and you thrive in sort of uncertainty and the unknown, then good for you, and you're a great person to work in a rapidly growing business. If you like to have everything set out and you don't, and you like to know, what's going to happen in the next 3 and 6 and 9 months, then don't go join the startup, because there's no certainty around where it's going to go.
So do you see, as you talk with and coach with MBA students, as they're looking at this specialization of innovation and entrepreneurship, do you see particular trends? So if you could say there's maybe 2 or 3 main trends of types of jobs or positions that students kind of gravitate toward, after they've done an internship, they then come back and take additional classes to finish out their degree program. Do you then see particular paths that students kind of look at? And if you could maybe define what some of those paths are that students do, like maybe starting a company versus, you said, working for a company with growth. So what are some of the big areas that students may go after post MBA and kind of that initial post MBA job and employment area?
Sure. Well, I always say there's like 3 pathways, and I'm trying to hold my finger in front of my hand so it doesn't disappear into the background. So the first is, you start a company and you've come into the program, you found an idea, you've got something and you're going to launch it. And sometimes the post MBA timeframe in someone's life is the perfect time to launch a business, right? You've been a student, so you've pared down your living expenses. You're focused on this particular thing. You're not trying to get rid of a job or something else that you're doing. So it's a great time to start a company. So that's one pathway. And I'd say there's probably like 10 to 20% of the students go choose that pathway. The next pathway is the working for a larger firm. Say you've got some experience, but it's not for bigger companies. A great way to sort of figure out your professional objectives is to go work for a larger firm like a Nike or an Intel, Columbia Sportswear, you name any sort of tech company, some bigger firm where you're going to get support as an employee for growth and training and learning, continue your learning on the job. So that's sort of, you've got the startups, you've got to go work for the big company. And the third option is that sort of go work for a high growth oriented company where you come in. I've got a great example of this that just came across my desk this morning, where a student came to U of O, got his MBA, and ended up deciding not to pursue his startup idea that he worked on through the program, but he ended up going to work for a local firm that makes laundry detergent called the Funkify. And so Eddie Rosenberg is this student, and he joined them as director of marketing, because basically they needed someone to do marketing, and there was just 2 or 3 people in the company, and they're like, hey, you know how to do marketing, come join us as director of marketing. Well, I just saw that they just closed a round of investment, and they're going to really position themselves for growth. So what Eddie's done is the classic example of that third pathway, which is go to work for a company. You're not exactly sure what it is they need you to do, but they need someone that's focused on the growth opportunity of that particular business. And Eddie's done everything from, setting up websites and managing social media to figuring out how to sell more. And that's a great sort of example of what can happen if you landed a small company and you're there as employee number 5 or employee number 20, and you're going to watch that growth trajectory go as it gets to 100, 200 employees, that type of thing. So that's a really sort of a great way to think about an MBA, is to get yourself into a company at its sort of early stages and then grow your career as that company grows.
Those are 3 great examples of paths, and some really good examples from students. Do you perhaps have some other success stories of where students have gone through the Lundquist Center for Entrepreneurship and then eventually started a successful company?
Sure. I mean, there's the ones we've talked about a bunch. There's the Red Duck Foods, which was 3 alums out of the class of 2013 that started a business around ketchup. And they built a business that sold the last year. They exited that, and it's now moved on to another company. I'd also say that there's folks like Ty Manigold, who's started a company called AirFit, which I wouldn't say is like 100% realized their success, but he's managed to get his concept of a gym in airports up and running. He's got a location in Baltimore. I believe he's got another one coming online in San Francisco sometime this year. So, that's another success story where, because he went through the MBA and used his studies to really flesh out the idea, he was able to build that opportunity. And then there's been several others that have just been sort of interesting products and ideas that have come forth, and they've been able to use the time in the MBA to do the research necessary to figure out what their opportunity looks like. So Emily Darchuk with Wayward Spirits is another one that comes to mind. She came, and she's a food scientist by training, and she had this idea that she could make alcohol out of waste products from the dairy industry. And one, she's a food scientist, so she was able to actually make that product. But 2, she used the MBA to really work through the business details around that idea.
Very good examples. Thank you. Now, we want to invite anyone that's joined us today, if they have questions for Ryan, as the program manager for the Lundquist Center for Entrepreneurship, or any questions about the center-specific MBA specialization in innovation and entrepreneurship, feel free to type in your questions into the chat. We have a few minutes to answer any questions from our audience. But as people are typing in some of their responses, are there any advice for students that you would give for people looking to go into innovation and entrepreneurship as kind of a pivot or change in their career?
Well, I think if there's a takeaway, sort of a broad strokes advice, it is, go into an MBA with your eyes wide open and open to different possibilities. So oftentimes students will come and they'll get involved with the MBA program, and they'll get into finance or management or some other discipline. They'll be like, I really like this, right? It'll resonate with them. Maybe it's finance, and they want to dig deeper into that. And it's, come to the program with open perspective to follow the pathway that really works for you, right? It's not because you come and you say, I want to study innovation entrepreneurship, you're not choosing a path that you can't deviate from down the line, right? We exist here at the U of O and the Oregon MBA to help students find the things that are most impactful for them in the rest of their careers. So I think if there's advice, it's, be open to change, be curious and inquisitive about the things that are available to you as you go through this sort of program, and then, dig deep into the things that you're interested in. And I've seen that happen with students who started in the innovation entrepreneurship track and ended up in finance because they figured out, 1, they really liked finance, and 2, it was innovative and entrepreneurial enough for them, but it was also a good way to have a steady paycheck. And so banking is never a bad place to end up. right? Consulting is never a bad place to end up. And what you do right out of your MBA isn't necessarily what you're going to do for the rest of your life.
Well, thank you, Nathan. We really appreciate you sharing your advice and opinion and information about the Lundquist Center for Entrepreneurship with us this afternoon. And so if anyone wants to get in touch with us regarding the Center for Entrepreneurship or the MBA specialization in innovation and entrepreneurship, you can reach out to us by email at mbainfo@uoregon.edu. We look forward to hosting other events in our webinar series. Join us for upcoming events on our information page. Thank you again, Nathan, for helping us out today. And we look forward to connecting with each of you.